better, actually. I run a store. I have customers. No, I run a store. That's I have another one. I do like the one that I picked again. I run with you a step behind. This is one of the artists.
Tell me about the last one. What did you mean by it?
The one that I chose. I feel like this book was the main thrust of this book was the book that I wanted to write when I was 20, which was that I realised that music had changed when I was growing up, and the music that I'd grown up with had changed suddenly, and I had this new set of customers, which were the audience that the very, very young who were playing to the Shepherd's Bush, our neighbourhood who grew up. And I had no words really for them. I had no, the kind of songs that songwriters that were around me at the time wrote. The artwork for the Keys thing was fabulous, was absolutely fabulous, wonderful. But what the Stones were doing, for example, is they were playing songs from America, as Keith said. The Beatles were singing love songs. I had no words. I was unformed as a lover. I didn't have lovers. I wasn't a street fighter. I was an art student. That's what I did. And as an art student, I felt divorced from the rock and roll audience that we performed before. And I wanted words from them. And the words that I was able to give them were the words of inarticulacy, the words that would, in a sense, allow them to say what they couldn't say, and set the words to music. So the words are yours, and the music is mine.
And to some extent, one of the reasons I wanted to show you that portrait was that he, just as you, shared that sense of the war.
Yeah.
And your book is divided in various acts. And the first act is war. And war, the degree of the war was the degree in which you played.
As a kid, as a little boy, from the age of about 3.5 to 4.5, I was in a gang of boys, and there were 14 of them. I numbered them 14. There were 14 that I can remember. I can remember a lot of their names as well. But we rampaged in this little neighbourhood that we lived in. We were now completely free running. I can remember running into a blacksmith's. There was a blacksmith in our street, in our neighbourhood, and horses, hooves. There was a place that made muffins, and we used to run into the muffin store, and we used to wear these beautiful white outfits with white caps. And we would run in and take the muffins, throw them, and then run into the street. There were buildings that had not been investigated properly, so we would find things in the wreckage. One of my friends found a watch. And I didn't find anything of that sort as a child, but I saw this happen. In the house that I lived in, right next door, 2 houses had been completely bombed. And there was a big bomb site behind my house that I played in at the time. But just like Keith, that was my play space. And it was a fantastic empty, wonderful play space. You can take old bricks to build new buildings.
Wonderful playground.
Yeah.
So the degree were a wonderful playground for you and for Keith. I remember having on the stage the German filmmaker Werner Herzog, who was saying the same thing. It was fantastic to grow up at that time.
It was probably very different from now because he was in a place that didn't have the sense of validation that we had in the UK. But the validation was a problem when we became teenagers because our parents' generation felt that they'd given us this free life, freedom from war, freedom from the need to, we would become young men who would never be told, here's a gun, go and kill the Germans. That was never going to happen to us. Now, I didn't want to kill the Germans, of course, I didn't want to kill anyone. But the generations that had gone before had been given that gun and stood taller. They stood taller, they thought, now I have a role, now I have, and of course young Germans were given guns and told to go to the French and the English and everybody else was going away. And so in a sense, what happened as a result of this post-war period that I grew up in is that we reached this point where we realized not only did we need a different life, a different meaning, a different role, a different job, but we needed different music, we needed different painting, different clothes, a different way of walking, everything we knew. And that was started around the time I was 13 or 14 years old. I started to realize that my language, a new language, a new grammar, and new codes, because, and I was very aware of this even as a young man, because my father was a musician performing popular music, which was the palliative, the soothing massage for people of his age. Now, who were they? They were my parents, they were people who had been young during the war. My mother falsified her age to fight in the RAF. She said she was 16 and she was actually only 15 in order to drive a truck. And so when the war was over, they were still very, very young. They were children, they were young people. And I was born at the very, very end of the war, in May 19th, 1945. The war was just finishing. And their music was, from 1945 all the way through to probably 1960, was designed to bring romance, hope, vision, colour back into what King called black and white world that
we have a picture here which is quite significant.
My dad is a third from the left from the right.
And what kind of music was Square Dance playing?
They kind of play the music, that kind of stuff. They play standards and sort of standards from Broadway. And they would have a sexy red-headed singer in the front and a good-looking guy in a tux, and they would sing. And my father was a good singer too. They would have these kind of barbershop quartet routines as well. It's very much American music. Very much American.
But in some sense not meaningful to you.
When I was a child, it was very meaningful because I grew up on the bus with the band, and why am I so relaxed now? I had no nerves, I had no fear. It's not because I'm necessarily a natural performer. I think what's enabled me to become a natural performer is that I'm there, I'm behind the curtain looking out. It was my safe place. Being on stage with my father, being behind the stage with my father is where I feel most comfortable. Where I really don't want to be is out there with you. I kind of feel uneasy out there. When I go to shows, it takes me a while to get comfortable. I can do it, but I feel most comfortable up here. Or backstage.
But I'm very glad you're here. There is a passage in your book which I think is just extraordinary in terms of this moment of the war and how music in some way needs to be a response to it. You say, my musical certainty drove me blindly forward. I felt I was hauling a band behind me that was ill-suited to the ideas drummed into me at college, but it was a better vehicle than the conventional life of a graphic designer. I wasn't trying to play beautiful music. I was confronting my audience, and with an awful, visceral sound of what we all knew was the single absolute of our frail existence. One day, an aeroplane would carry a bomb that would destroy us all in a flash. It could happen at any time. The Cuban crisis less than 2 years before had proved that. On stage, I stood on the tips of my toes, arms outstretched, swooping like a plane. As I raised the stuttering guitar above my head, I felt I was holding up the bloody standard of endless centuries of mindless wars, explosions, trenches, bodies, the eerie screaming of the wind. I had made my choice for now. It would be music. Give the audience here a sense of the urgency and the quality of your writing, the bravura of it.
Well, it's interesting because I did stretch myself there to evoke what I felt when you know, a young boy you see there looking like he's gone crazy. I felt nothing when I was doing that. You know, it was a cold, detached act of artistic statement. And occasionally, I would read in the newspaper, Roger Daltrey, the singer who said, "That's just a gimmick." And I would allow him that. I would allow him that. Because, but for me, it was nothing like that. It really was. It was, and I was very lucky. I wasn't just lucky to have been the son of a popular musician, or a musician playing popular music. I was also very lucky to have a timing for me when if I had moved into music professionally before I went to art school, I would have missed one of the most extraordinary art school courses that the UK ever produced, which was called the Basic Course, and it was revised by this extraordinary man called Roy Ascott, with two other guys, Harold Cohen, who was a computer visionary as an artist, and his brother Bernard, who went on to be the head of the Slade, the finest art school in Britain, and young painters from Cornwall, and lecturers brought in like Larry Rivers, who was a heroin-addicted, gay, saxophone-playing action painter, came and stayed at our college for 2 or 3 months, and Gustav Metzger, who was a destructive artist, whose work was nothing to do with destruction at all. It was to do with the fact that we, as people, were destroying our environment. No, we were destroying nature and calling it an environment. And as an artist, what you had was the duty to reflect that destruction. And so armed with the idea that the end was coming, the certain knowledge that the end was coming, armed with the knowledge that I had a duty to make my music sound like what it was that I thought was coming, armed with the idea that I had to do something with this band, who, okay, they were not the perfect instrument. I didn't feel they were at the time, but they became so. You know, the Who, I couldn't have had better men beside me. I couldn't have, you know. In fact, if it had been 4 arty-farty art students all thought like I did, it would have been a complete mess. I just need to kind of walk around with my own ideas, and the rest of them go on and enjoy it. And Roger fact that he used to have to come around and dig me out of bed, you know, but, to go to shows. Because I was a deep thinker. I smoked pot, listened to R&B records, but that moment of uniting what had happened, what I'd been taught at art school, and suddenly realising that this little band that was in, this little R&B band, we were just one of the bands around at the time in West London, had this potential to make this extraordinary noise. And Roger, as a singer, is quite interesting because two of the singers that he loved the most, one was Howlin' Wolf, who howled like a wolf. Who's that guy? And that was this little skinny little guy, this little one howling in this huge voice, me making my noise. And Joe, just as a bass player, was another extraordinary character. He wasn't content to play the bass. He wanted it to be more. He wanted it to be like a huge organ and had these special strings made. It didn't go boom, very and would bang away. And Keith Moon, of course, we all know about this incredibly expressive, fluid, almost orchestral drum. He didn't play like most R&B songs did. He could play kind of like orchestral line. It was decorative. And so when I'm standing there, pretending to be, you know, to be playing and bringing the ball that's going to be the end of the world, is it sad? You don't look at my nose, it's coming. Around me, there's Roger going, bang away, making the noise like 5 or 6, you know, huge theatre orders all playing at once. And Keith making this, you know, incredible kind of, almost like timpani and cymbals and, you know, don't like them all kind of music that other bands like. It was Denver. It was perfect for the artistic state of how much to make.
But this was most amazing in the statement that early on you said that it was visceral music. You say detached.
Yes.
How? I mean, certainly on this stage now, my listening to you describe that moment doesn't make me feel at all detached. I feel very involved in that. But you claim that you were removed. You were internal, that you internalized, you were writing these songs, but not singing them, and you were removed from it. I just wonder how that's possible.
It's semantics. What I mean is that I would perform in a, you know, this is where I sound like an actor. And, you know, I'm not very good at acting. I just do what I do. I don't act. I don't really know how to act. But I was able to. What you described is the first time that I put it together. Because I suppose what must have happened at that time was that I must have looked to the audience to see whether what I was doing was reaching you. You know, I'm doing this, I'm thinking this is the sound of you know, this is the sound of war that will end all wars. You know, an absurd thing for an 18-year-old young man with a guitar and amplifier that's too big, you know, to be doing in a little pub when young men were trying to seduce a girl to take home and kiss. Suddenly, those young men in their beautiful suits and the young girls in their beautiful dresses who were there to see each other, to smooch, to have the last dance, suddenly they're looking on different spots. They had exactly the same need for their music to confront, for there to be no more denial that we needed music that addressed the fact that we were living in constant fear and anxiety and terror and certainty that the world would end shortly, and that it was only by tremendous good luck and serendipity that it had happened.
You have this passage about Gustav Metzger, encouraged by the works of Gustav Metzger, the pioneer of auto-destructive art. I secretly planned to completely destroy my guitar if the moment seemed right. So, the genealogy of the destruction of the guitar comes
It comes down to that thing of thinking after a while that this is enough, and what I have to do is I have to make some new sounds. And I start playing the guitar around, and that becomes very, very easy. The guitar I was using in these early days was a Rickenbacker. It's a very light-built guitar. It's very delicate and thin wood and very vibrant. It's a semi-acoustic guitar, so the feedback easily and make this incredibly extraordinary sound. But then I would manage it in the amplifier, I take it to a kind of boing crash, and then scrape the strings, and that would make another sound. Scrape the strings up and down the mic stand. And I imagined that when I broke it, I hit the guitar on the ground, and bounced the guitar down, bashed it on the ceiling or whatever, then it would make an interesting sound. And it did. And also, you know, I think it's pretty cool doing it. A very extraordinary day with my friend Barney, who was my flatmate. You know, he was the guy who slept in the same room and shared joys, listened to the same records, and we shared an apartment together. One day, he decided he wanted to start promoting shows, and we started this little club gig in West London. And it was at that show that he invited a lot of our friends from our school who had heard the lectures that I had heard, who understood what auto-destructive art was supposed to be, who'd seen all the same lectures, they'd heard all the same ideas. And the rest of the groups were local mods. They were young boys, mainly, who come students and they're kind of strange to dancers. That was the other side of the audience. And I was kind of doing my show on routine, and then bang, the guitar, singing, and the head came. It just broke. And the head dropped to the ground, and the guitar just whistled. That was the noise. And I looked, everybody's kind of looking at me expectantly, and the modern kids were kind of looking in a cynical way. It was like, now look at me go. And what can we do now? But the art school guys were waiting for what would happen next. I had no choice but to smash. I mean that very seriously. My reputation was at stake. Had I impressed the important lesson, or had I been flunking out? You know, I was there. I knew what I had to do, so I smashed it. And it wasn't that there was a rip of applause, but the bar students went, good. I had to bought another guitar, picked it up, and continued the show. And that was the closing of the circle. It felt magnificent to me. These Rickenbacker guitars in that age, 1963, late 1963 over 64, cost the equivalent today of £3,900, nearly $5,000. And I had mine on credit.
delusion every time.
It felt right. But in the end, of course, it did become perceived as something to do. But
Have you resisted that?
no, always for me, it's always been more. You know, I've occasionally slipped into breaking the guitar because I've become annoyed with it. And tossed it aside. But if there's the last guitar that I wrote, with the sense that this was incredibly important. It's on YouTube, you can see me do it. The first time I was made in Japan, quite recently, I think 2010, perhaps 2008, or something. And we were playing, and suddenly I became like a samurai. I realized that the whole of the audience stand up, and everybody stood in celebration of this act of the destruction of the symbol of the music that has become about money, about sex and drugs, and aren't we so fabulous, and you know, we have this, and we have that, we've done this, and we've done that. Somehow, that moment for me is still about that. It's making a separation between the life that I began as a young artist and the life that I've been lumbered with as a 67-year-old rock star, you know, expected to behave like a politician.
I was imagining that lifting that guitar and smashing it, that moment when it is up there, is the reenactment of the possibility of doom and gloom.
I think that's right. I think that it's a tremendous
release.
Yeah. It's a release. I mean, in the Blues early career, we had very, particularly in the northern parts of Europe, we had a few street rides after our shows, and they were always when we borrowed equipment from other bands, and we felt we couldn't smash it because it was ours. And our shows would get to this peak, and the audiences would think, we read it in newspapers, we know that we were going to smash the equipment. We didn't smash it, and then they would rush out into the street and smash shops.
The power of you had great. What happened in Denmark?
Aarhus, that's exactly what happened. It was, we were using borrowed equipment. Audience of very, very tough, farming kind of boys who gathered. And they wanted this act of violence, and we didn't give it to them. And they destroyed the hall that we performed in, and then they destroyed part of the town. We were practically arrested. We were certainly chased by. We went on to play in Germany, and in Germany, occasionally priests would come before we went on stage, and they would say, please, think of something. Trying to bring that stuff to that kind of approach didn't work very well with Keith. No, it touched me, and I would say, I remember when people would say to me, why do you need to do this? Your music is so wonderful, you're such a great performance, why do you have to take it further to one construction? I said, you just do not understand.